What's up, guys? Welcome back to Rad JBI. I'm JB. In this video, we're going to show you how to install our new JBI Spec WP XACT closed cartridge fork DIY kit. All right, so to the left of me, I have the shipping box that you're likely going to receive from us. Looks a bit like this. One of the first things that you're going to see from us is going to be our JBI suspension settings guide. This is going to give you some very good technical info in a couple key areas. First, it's going to tell you where to set the clickers once you're done completing the install. It's going to give you information on how much oil to put in the inner cartridge, how much oil to put in the outer cartridge, what spring rate we recommend, and some few other technical aspects as well. Next, you're probably going to notice that we give you a nice set of JBI fork stickers. We have another video on that, on how to install those. And now for the good stuff. We spent a lot of time on packaging recently, and we really love what we've come up with. Inside of these two plastic containers are their JBI titanium sub-valves. It is a key component of this DIY kit. It comes complete with the shims already on it, and all these are custom built based on the information that you give to us. Depending on what setting you go with, we're also going to give you a set of pressure springs, unless you pick out our motocross setting. In that case, we're going to be using the stock pressure springs. But anything softer than that, such as soft moto, flowy single track, technical off-road, again, anything softer than our motocross spec, you're going to get some softer pressure springs. And then you get two other plastic bags, properly labeled, our JBI Spec mid-valve rebound shims and JBI Spec mid-valve compression shims. So now we've unpacked our box of goodies, I'm going to show you the next steps on how to get this stuff installed into your new WP XACT closed cartridge forks. All right, so we are getting ready to break down this fork and show you how to install our JBI Spec DIY kit. First, let's go over some of the tools that you're going to need. Now, in this video, I'm going to show you the professional way to take apart these forks, aka with the proper tooling, and then I'm going to show you the backyard mechanic way of taking apart these forks and installing it. So, some of the key components you're going to need is one, a blowtorch or a propane torch. Beyond that, you're going to want a fork cap wrench. That's going to help a lot too. A 10 millimeter either ratchet and sockets or a 10 millimeter wrench, whatever you prefer, styling wise. You're definitely going to need a fork compression removal tool from the fork cartridge cylinder. Having a hard time speaking. And then I love these tools called knife picks, but you can also use an open end wrench as well. We'll show you when we get to this part when we need them. So without further ado, let's start tearing down these forks. And to the left of me, I'm going to show you some of the vices that I'm going to use during this disassembly. All right, so step one, and this applies to pretty much all forks and shocks that you're going to work on, is we want to back the clickers all the way out. So we're beginning with the top clicker here. That's the compression clicker. These ones come with a very convenient finger adjuster. So we're going to back it out counterclockwise. That's going to put the suspension in the softest, least restrictive setting. Cool, so I went all the way out. Now I'm going to go back in just one click, because when you go all the way out, we're putting a little bit of tension against like a circlip on the inside. So we're going to take the tension off of that. Now at the bottom of this fork, I like that move, we have the rebound adjuster as well. It also has a finger adjuster too, which you can spin by hand. I don't like gripping it that much. Instead, you can use a Torx number 20 and you can spin it there instead. And I find it just a lot easier to do. So we're going to go all the way out counterclockwise, and then back in just a click. Our next step now is going to be cracking the fork cap loose. Now we have an awesome vise specifically designed and made for gripping round objects. Now a lot of you probably don't have that. Sometimes these caps are pretty tight from the factory. So a good way to loosen this is to remount this fork back into your triple clamps. Just tighten down the bottom clamp, not the top one. And then use your fork cap tool to throw it on the fork cap and crack that loose. Then you can slide the fork back out. Now, as you can see to the left of me, we have an awesome vise for that already. It's made out of aluminum, so it's soft jaws. We're going to tighten that down. Now it's ready for us to crack this cap loose. If you heard that clicking sound, that means you have unthreaded this all the way and it is ready for the oil to be drained out. Another way to check, you can kind of lift up from the bottom. Now let's be gentle with this. Let's not drop it and ruin the threads. Now, as much as I do suspension, I've been doing it a long time, I freaking hate oil. By that I mean I hate getting it everywhere, I hate splashing. So as you can see, we have a very big container here for containing and catching oil. For you guys at home, I recommend finding the biggest oil pan you can find and something big to pour the oil into instead of something small. That'll help really minimize any mess that you're gonna make. And if you're gonna use a 5-gallon bucket, I strongly recommend you empty out that bucket before you start, because if that bucket already has some oil in it, I promise you, if you drop anything during this build, it's gonna go inside that bucket and you're gonna be fishing for it. And fishing for parts in a bucket of dirty oil just isn't really much fun. Now we got most of the oil out. Something to pay attention to is this air vent hole, this bleed hole right here. A lot of residual oil likes to hang out inside of there. Ooh, we got a little squirter right there. So I'm actually gonna slide this back up and I'm gonna hand tighten this about halfway among the threads, just so that way this fork doesn't really move too much. Next, we're gonna mount this bottom section and our parallel jawed vise right here. If you don't, please get some aluminum inserts for it. Most vices have steel inserts that are knurled, so they're gonna bite into your lug and they're gonna leave some permanent marks into it that just don't look good. Now, typically when it comes to parallel vices like this, I always recommend trying to clamp in the middle as much as you can. However, if you do that, you're gonna have a hard time accessing the rebound bolt at the bottom with the socket. So as you can see, I offsetted it just a little bit to the right. For this next step, we are going to move the bottom rebound adjuster bolt. In order to do that, we're gonna use a 22mm socket. As you can see, this is not an impact socket, it is a chrome one. And you're gonna need to use that for here. If you try to use an impact socket, those are typically thicker walled sockets and it's not gonna fit inside of here. You're gonna have interference fitment. So again, use a regular chrome socket. I love using 6-point sockets as they tend to have a better surface grip on them. But if you got a multiple point fit socket, it's still gonna work. Put it on the loose setting or left. So these forks are very neat as they are a twin chamber spring fork, but they come apart a little differently than how you normally take apart a similar KYB, Showa, or even the WP XACT Pro cartridge forks. So I have that loose. I'm going to grab our plastic container, which we're going to house all our parts in while we work into. And this rebound bolt's just going to slide out afterwards right here. We got a little bit of dirt collected around it. That's very common. It's at the bottom. I like to clean as I go. So we're going to take a rag and wipe off this dirt along with any extra grease or oil that's on it. So that way we're just not touching the same part multiple times. Now it is time to remove the damping assembly along with the spring from the fork. We could slide it out right now, but we're gonna get a bunch of oil on my table. Again, I don't wanna do that, so I'm gonna re-loosen this from our vise. Another reason why I kept this top on there is so these pieces stay connected, but this fork can slide apart now. So that's why I'm holding it at the bottom and up here at top. I'm gonna rest this fork inside our tub. Now this entire assembly is going to come apart. Very neat design from WP. I think it makes it very efficient to work on it and very clean compared to the other style of twin chamber forks. Now we're not going to show you how to do forks. We're not going to show you how to do fork seals in this video. There's plenty of other videos detailing how to do that. I'm just going to flip this upside down one last time. Get out any residual oil that may be in there. So now it's ready for us to remove the spring from this. This has a very cool keeper design. I'm going to flip this upside down. This is not stock. Somebody previously worked on these. There should not be a bunch of metal spacers up here. Just ignore that. We peeled off the previous company stickers. We won't say who. Now, before I flip this upside down, I don't want to put pressure on this plastic piece and possibly crack it or ruin it. So I'm going to take a rag and set that down instead. And we'll put that right like that. So up here, we have what we call a C-clip. If I pull down on the spring, we can lift up. Pull that C-clip out. I'll show you one more time. Now, for you guys at home, you're likely going to have this C-clip and a white plastic preload spacer underneath it if you're working on a stock fork, meaning a fork that hasn't been resprung or worked on by another company already. These appear to be race tech springs. The way I can tell is the way they have their marking on there that tell the spring rate, but also due to the poor wire quality. These springs are really rough on the outside. They make a lot of noise when you ride, and also they dirty up the oil very quickly because the spring is going to rub on the inside of the fork tube and it's going to polish away this roughness over time. That's the main reason why we love using K-Tech springs here at Ride JBI or even the OEM WP brand springs, is their wire material is smooth and polished to finish. Also, they're true to length. The reason they have spacers on this fork is because these springs are likely not true to length. So now our next step is we're going to remove these ugly metal spacers I had on there. And now this is the stock spring tube. If you notice, I grabbed it at the bottom. If I grabbed it up top, this would actually slide off. And there's going to be a metal support ring underneath that. You need to keep those together. If you misplace that and then put this back on, you're going to bust this tube through the plastic, let's call it spring seat. Now we are at what's called our new WP XACT closed cartridge damping assembly. WP did a very good job. That this is the first time that they have come out with a new twin chamber fork design since they came out with the WP closed cartridge bladder fork in about 2007. Around the same time they came out with the WP cone valve fork as well. Both of those shared very many similarities in terms of the mid valve piston that they use and the base compression piston that they used. What's neat about this fork is this takes a lot of very good elements from like a KYB style fork and some of the best elements of WPs as well. It also has this huge bottoming cone built into the bottom, so it's going to give you some really good bottoming resistance the last few inches of travel when this kicks in. It almost gives you a little bit too much for some of you off-road riders. Now, next step we want to do is we want to move our compression assembly from this fork cartridge cylinder. WP is very nice as they gave us two flat clamping surfaces that we can mount up inside of this vise and clamp right here. And the majority of you are going to do that. At the shop, we have these awesome shaft block clamps here that I love to use instead. Reason being is they're very tall and they give us a very large amount of surface area to clamp on. But oil is a great lubricant. It is terrible for clamping and fixing things. So we're going to wipe this down free of any oil. So typically I like to use these right here. I can set them just below and it's going to give us a very, very good fixture on our cartridge. But I will show you guys how to do it because likely you won't have these. So again, we're going to use these two flat spots. Try to get it as far in on the vise as you can, but we don't want the cartridge rubbing against the inside of the vise. And then don't get crazy with over tightening this. When it comes to clamping a lot of these items, we want to clamp it just tight enough to where it doesn't move and you can take it apart. You don't want to over clamp it because the majority of this is made out of aluminum. Aluminum doesn't have a great material characteristic in bouncing back, meaning if you compress it, it's going to stay compressed and it's not going to bounce back and it won't return back to original form. So now that we have this here, we're going to use this is the official WP tool for removing the compression assemblies. And what I like about this one is it's two-sided, so it works on more than one style of fork. We also have another one from the brand Motion Pro that you can get as well. So now that we got that on top, I'm going to grab my 3/8 drive ratchet and we can go ahead and crack this loose. Now, in order to get this out, I'm going to push on the damping rod at the bottom and we're going to see this assembly come on up. Excellent. Now that we have this up, it's time to remove this. Now, this is where myself and my coworkers have a lot of fun, as we like to see who can remove these with the most gentleness instead of just yanking it out. Because as you go to remove this, you're going to be creating a vacuum underneath the piston. So it's going to be wanting to pull this compression assembly back into it. So let's see how good I am today. I'm feeling pretty confident. I kind of wiggle back and forth and around because what I'm trying to do is break the seal. But if I let go, you see it pull back down. So that's what I mean by a vacuum. If you yank, you're going to yank that thing out and oil's going to go flying everywhere. And you're probably going to get dirty. Oh, that's some good beep. You can hear that sound. Sweet. So that one came out very beautiful. It didn't yank out fast. The reason we don't want to yank it out fast is there's potential for damaging what we call the quad ring right here. That's part of the free piston. This one's very critical in creating a seal on the inside of this cylinder. Also, we don't want to damage the O-ring on the outside of this piston, as well as that creates a very critical seal also in order to create a lot of damping pressure. So this is our compression assembly. We're going to set this aside for a minute so we can further disassemble our cartridge cylinder to get out the mid-valve on it. But first, shake it once, shake it twice, we shake it 3 times. If you know that Good Charlotte song, let's pop this out. So you still have some residual oil inside of here. I'm going to flick it upside down. Now again, if you're not in a rush, this is where typically at Ride JBI we batch a lot of stuff. I would set this cartridge cylinder at an angle like this, start working on the other fork, or just work on something else for a while and just let gravity do its thing and let all the oil drain out. So that when we come back to work on it some more, it's just a lot less oil to work on. Cool. So our next step is we need to get the cartridge rod assembly out of this cartridge cylinder. Now, the majority of people want to try to remove these 2 items. Don't try to do that. There is so much Loctite and this is torqued on there so much, you're going to have a hell of a time doing it. So instead, we're going to be removing what's called the cartridge seal head assembly. That is this lighter silver piece in contrast to the darker gray cartridge cylinder tube right here. We have 2 beautiful flat spots. These are the 24. Yeah, a 24 fits, not beautifully. This is where we love to use our Nipacks, or people call them nitpicks. They pronounce the K when you shouldn't, because you don't say knight, you say night if you're referencing that. These we can size perfectly to fit inside of here, and that's what I'm actually going to use. But if you don't have some of these, you can get it from Amazon. It looks like a 24 millimeter open end wrench is also going to be your good use for that. Now, this is also Loctited inside of here, so we're going to apply some heat to warm this up. Now, the pro way of getting this out is we're going to slide this all the way down. That is going to put the mid piston in about this region right here. So what that means is we can safely clamp the cartridge tube in this area without grabbing the mid piston and possibly damaging it or distorting it. We can do that with our clamps here. Oh, wrong size. Now, these clamps are from our friend called Dave.Moto. He makes some really, really good suspension tools. And I would clamp it as such. And that's how I'm going to take it apart, because I want it to come apart the best way it can. But an alternative way of doing it is you can, again, remount the cartridge cylinder in these flat spots here inside of your vise. But the reason I don't like that is there's a possibility that when you go to loosen this, you could actually loosen this entire cartridge cylinder from what we call the cartridge sub-tank, this upper piece, because this darker gray threads into this, the lighter gray material. So to prevent that from happening, ideally you want some cartridge clamps. Again, I realize not everybody's going to have that, so you can fixture it this way. You're just going to want to make sure this doesn't come undone. Another way to help ensure that doesn't come undone is get your friend or get your wife, have them take the fork cap tool, put that on the bottom, and that'll also aid in preventing from this spinning. Because anytime we're gripping a round object and we don't want it to spin, oil is the last thing that we want in between our clamps and the clamping object. All right, so now we have this cartridge beautifully mounted inside of our vise. I'm going to continue wiping this down of any oil, because our next step is going to be heating this up, and we're not trying to smoke ourselves out like Snoop Dogg. Now, there is a plastic piece right here we want to be aware of when we heat it up. There is a circlip that holds it in place. You can pop that off if you'd like, or I can show you a neat little trick to make sure it doesn't melt when we go to take it apart. So what I did do already is I sized my Nipacks to be perfectly fitted with this. Awesome. So the thing with heat is heat tends to rise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus our heat just below where the, let's see if I'm on the money for this one. I'm going to fixture this. Double check our torque. Oh, almost like I've done this before. Now, if you heat it up too much, one sign you're going to tell is when you loosen this, you're going to hear the O-ring go, and it's going to pop outwardly. That's because you got it so hot, that O-ring in the oil was trying to expand, and once you open it up, it did expand outwards. And if that's the case, you likely heated up too much, and you probably want to replace that cartridge seal. Now, it looks like we can check. We have this ready to go. Now, what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to try to pull this out right now because this is clamping that. And it's going to be really hard to pull the mid piston past this clamped area. So instead, I'm going to let go. Let this cool down for a bit because I have a habit for grabbing things that I just heated up and forgetting that I did that. I don't feel like melting my glove to my hand today. Cool. So I've removed the cartridge from our shaft block clamps. And now it is time to remove this from it. Ooh, what I'm going to do though is I'm going to flip this right side up. So that way, as I remove it, if there's any Loctite or any debris, it's going to fall out of the cartridge instead of inside of the cartridge. Oh yeah. Let's set this down. It didn't take long enough, I guess. Sweet. So we are about halfway there on your install. Pretty much we've done the hard part of it. Now I'm going to just kind of give this a couple shakes, get off any residual oil, and we can set this inside of our tub. Now, while this is still warm, I like to try to clean out the bottom of the cartridge. That way the Loctite is still warm and it'll come out easy. As you notice, I'm doing this right side up so the stuff falls out and not into the cartridge. Out of the 20 years I've been doing suspension, I've picked up just some of those minor tips that I like to share over the years that don't seem like a lot, but they go a long way when it comes to building a lot of suspension and building it consistently to ensure that everything you build and goes out the door feels very similar. And I want to share those tips with you guys so that way you can replicate the quality of work we do here at Ride JBI HQ. So now that I'm done finger blasting the inside of this cartridge with my finger in this rag, it's looking very clean inside of there. And I'm not seeing any sort of debris or contaminants, just a little bit of oil film on the inside of there, which is totally fine. We got our compression assembly and we got our cartridge rod assembly. The next step is we need to get the valving off of this and valving off of that. In order to do that, we're going to need to remove the top of these threads in order to safely remove it. Now it looks like this suspension has previously already been ground by somebody else, but we're going to go ahead and just show you a little demo on how to do that so you know how to do it on your personal stuff. All right, guys, we have two ways we could remove the peening on top of what we call the compression post. We can use a grinding wheel right here, or you can use a hand file. Now the hand file is going to be a little bit slower to do, but maybe a little less lower probability of messing it up. What's nice with this is we're giving you a new sub-valve post, so you can kind of ruin this one. The rebound one, do not ruin because we got to reuse that one. So safety shades are very important. I picked up these beauties from Amazon in the fashion section. They got really big lenses. They do a good job protecting my eyes. But what you do is just flick it on. And I'm going to kiss the grinding wheel with the tool, not my lips. And as I do that, I'm going to touch it and spin, pull back, touch it and spin, pull back, in order to get a nice and even grind against this. And we're going to go all the way down to where we start to grind the actual nut itself. That way we know we've taken off enough threads to safely remove the nut. Awesome. So now that we have done that, you can see that the compression post is flat with the nut. We took off a little bit of material on the nut as well. We definitely have some debris around this. So we're going to use our solvent tank right here to wash out any remnants. And this will kind of be our first wash of it. And as we do the install, we'll take apart more of these pieces and wipe them down with a nice microfiber and really ensure that we don't have any debris or contaminants inside of this suspension assembly. So you can get a nice close-up on this. You can see that, again, the nut and the post are flush and even with each other. You're going to want to do the same exact thing with your rebound damper rod. Again, the suspension we're working on was already ground by somebody else, so I don't want to go ahead and further grind that just for the demonstration of this video. I believe you guys are smart enough to take away the concept that I'm informing you of on how to do this. Also, you can use a hand file if you don't have a grinder at home. It's just going to take a little while to hand file it. It's a little bit challenging sometimes to hold an object sturdy as you file something, but hey, if you got the time, you can definitely make it happen. So as I clean this, this is a petroleum solvent, meaning it's petroleum based. It is a solvent that plays very nicely with the type of plastics and rubbers that are found in suspension, meaning it's not going to enlarge it or expand it. If at your house you're using brake cleaner or carburetor cleaner, be very careful. A lot of those are acetone based instead of petroleum based. And what that can cause is these O-rings to swell and expand, thus rendering them useless and no longer working. So depending on your choice of cleaner, be very careful. I know Maxima makes a great suspension cleaner called SC1. So you can purchase that if you don't have a, let's say, solvent tank at home, such as this. Also softer, let's say, solvents such as electrical keyboard cleaners and like computer stuff works great as well. So I've got pretty much the majority of all the contaminants off of this, and it is ready for us to begin tearing this further down for our install. All right, guys, great job so far. Follow along with us. So just to cap off what we did, we ground the tips of both of these. Next, we're going to fixture these in a way so that way we can remove the valving on both of these. Now, to the left of me, I have the tools we're going to utilize. I'm going to reuse the same tool here that I used to remove this compression assembly that locates inside of here. Now, the way I'm going to do that is we have these wrenches here that are flat. So I'm going to put this inside of a vise and mount that here. That's why I bought these wrenches, because I think they're just badass for doing stuff like that. Now, if you don't have something like that, you can also put a longer extension in this and grip it there, or just figure out your own way of how you want to fixture this. So now we have that. We'll just relocate this tool inside of our part. So now that we have that fixtured up, it's going to take a 10 millimeter to remove this top nut. And I'm not going to take it off all the way, but what I am going to do next is I'm going to take this off of here to remove the rest of the valving, just that way I can hold it in my hand on the table and be more sturdy instead of it possibly wobbling around here and everything falling over and you're chasing shims. Because if you do drop these things tend to scurry away really well and hide in these little nooks and crannies in your garage. You're probably not going to find it. What I've done here is we've taken multiple clothes hangers and we've cut them up and we've just kind of bent them in a way in order to hold shims. If you don't have something like this, you can also use something like a smaller T. Let's see, this is like a 2.5 Allen key, and that'll fit really well also for just storing everything. But I like to use, I kind of have my own process, so we're going to stick to that. I'm going to open up this guy right here. Now that I got that in there, I'm not pushing hard. We don't want to damage the needle that's in there. We can thread this off the rest of the way with our finger. And now slide up everything. Cool. I'm going to go up a little higher. And then lock this in place. Nice. You can make these at home on your own. Just go rob a clothing hanger out of your mom's or wife's closet. Next, we'll show you how to remove this. But before we do that, let's remove the valving off of our rebound rod assembly or cartridge rod assembly. There's a few ways we can fixture this as well. Shaft ball clamps are probably the best. Race Tech makes some very good ones. They have a bunch of different sizes as well. And then I also have this set of clamps that I bought from Amazon. They're by a brand called Nice CNC. What I like about these ones is that they are taller. Well, they are a little bit taller in terms of the clamping area that you get. So what that gives is more clamping area on the rod. So there's a lesser chance of that rod spinning when we go to remove this. Now, if you don't have any shaft ball clamps, what you can do is you can take a number, I think 17 wrench. Let's see if I'm right. Yes, you can take a number 17 wrench And there is a hex here at the bottom, and you could slide it on there. You can hold this as you go to loosen that up. This wrench is a little bit too wide, so it's not quite fitting well inside of here. But if you got an angle grinder or something, you can definitely slim down the profile of that wrench. So that would be your backyard mechanic way of doing it. And this would be the more, let's say, professional way of doing it. Again, we're going to wipe down our object that is round before we go to clamp it. So that way we don't have any oil trying to make it or to allow it to spin. And then also, it's always good practice to wipe down your clamping fixture as well before you do it. That way, again, it's free of oil. It's also free of any contaminants such as dirt or maybe metal shavings. That way we don't press it into the rod itself and damage it. I'm going to go just below what we call the top out spring, and that'll hold it in place. And I'm going to slide this as far as I can to the center line as possible, but not too far to where I hit the rod against the inside of our vise. That way we get the most amount of clamping we can. Now this nut isn't on there crazy tight, but I like to err on the side of firmness or tightness to ensure that it's not going to spin. This is going to be another number 8 wrench. Now, if you haven't done a lot of valving before, I recommend putting this valving stack on another clothing hanger or another T-handle so you can know which is which. I've done a few sets, so I kind of have an idea of what is what. So let's crack this loose. Again, I'm leaving it on there. This time, I'm going to leave this fixtured because it's well fixtured in there. It's not loose. Let's put in our hanger. Spin this off the rest of the way with our finger. Now, there is a spring in the very bottom of this assembly. So as you see, this assembly is lifting up under the force of that spring. So just be aware of that. There's all the shims. And then we definitely want to maintain use of this spring as well. So we're going to grab that out also. It looks like this individual put a few extra shims in the bottom. Depending on the exact year, make, model bike that you have, your shim configuration and stock form is going to vary. Rest assured at Ride JBI, we're going to give you a complete new shim stack. So you just need to remove everything that is there and just reuse the shims that we give you along with this check valve spring also. Now I'm going to really look deep on the inside here and make sure there isn't any extra shims that I am missing, because if there is, that'll have a huge impact over the assembly and the performance of your kit. When it comes to suspension, very small details can have a huge influence over how it performs. Even though it might look small relative to what we're doing and how it functions, it can have a major impact. So let's not look over any of these small details, because I want to ensure that when we take all our time to ensure we give you the best setup we can, that you put on the effort on your end to ensure the probability of you having an awesome first impression is as high as possible. So I'm looking around here. It looks like I did clear off everything. I'll let you guys get a good close-up of this too, so you can see what I'm looking at. All right, guys, so now I'm going to show you what parts we're going to reuse and what parts you can discard or just throw on a zip tie. So to the left of me, I have the component assemblies that we disassembled of the shims. Again, there's no shims on this post, and there's no shims or spring on the rebound post as well. We have everything on our clothing hanger. We have to call them shim hangers here at the shop. So let's start off with what we're going to use and not use. At the very bottom is going to be our check valve shim. This is very important, and we're going to reuse that. Let's set that up at the top. Next, we have a bunch of shims here just underneath the mid-valve piston. Looks like we got some blue KYB ones mixed in here from the previous tuner. So all of these shims, again, every single one we can take and just set aside. We're going to sort these back to our shim cabinet. If you want, put a zip tie through them. You can reuse them. Next, we have our mid piston. Some settings and models will have a small shim on the inside of here. If you have that, discard it. If you need it, we will provide you with a new one. Let's check the top of this. There's nothing here. So on this side, that's going to be our reuse side. Excellent. Now we have all of our rebound shims. We'll pull all of these and set it in our other discard pile. We're not going to reuse any of those. Now we have the nut. We are going to reuse this. Don't mix up these nuts. This is a M6 by 0.75. It is a fine thread pitch. So just to be safe that we don't, let's spin this back up on there so you know that this nut goes there. All right. So now what we have left is our compression assembly shim stack. First item off is going to be this thick metal washer. We are not going to use that. All of the shims underneath that, we're also going to discard as well and provide you with new ones with. What we do want now is everything above that. So that is going to be our base compression piston, this very unique looking check valve shim. And then between this, I'm going to close this so I don't lose stuff. Between this check valve shim, there's going to be a much smaller 6 ID by I think 8 or 10 ID shim here. And then that goes in between that metal plate. So we're going to reuse all that as well. We aren't going to reuse this M6 by 1.0 pitch nut. Instead, we're going to provide you with a new gold titanium one to go with our subvalve. So we can set in this pile as well if we're not going to use. And I'm going to set this just right here. So as you can see, primarily we're going to reuse our check valve shim from the mid valve, our mid valve piston, and then just so I don't lose anything, our compression piston and the check valve assembly above it. So before we can start installing our JBI components that we provided you with, we got one more step to do, and that is going to be removing the OEM compression piston post so we can install our JBI titanium subvalve. One of the key parts of pretty much all our JBI spec setups if your style of forks don't already come with a subvalve, and this is one of those. So in order to do that, we need to heat it up a little bit. We're not going to use our propane torch instead. Reason being is we got some plastic below it. We don't want to melt or deform this plastic and or ruin the seals with it. Instead, we got a nice heat plate in the back by our grinder. We're going to turn that heat plate on, set that on top of the socket. What's nice about that heat plate is we turn it to a certain setting that ensures that the part gets hot, but not too hot to where it melts the plastic underneath it. You can kind of just set it, forget it, and walk away for a bit. So follow me to the back. Let's go get that turned on and get going. All right, to the right of me, I have our JBI heat plate. I'm going to turn it on to setting number 4, not all the way to 5. And then I also have a socket. Looks like it is a number 13 size. I'm going to set that socket upside down onto our plate because the flat part is going to rest directly against that. And that is going to allow the heat to transfer up directly onto our compression post. Now, another important reason to ensure that this is clean of oil is we don't want any oil dripping or dropping during this time. You're going to create some excess smoke, possibly a fire. Please do not use your stove at home or in your house. Your wife and or mom is probably be a little frustrated with you if you do that. Now, this takes a little while to heat up, typically about 10 to 15 minutes. So we're going to snip this and come back once this is heated up and ready to be removed. All right, guys, so we now have heated up the compression piston post. We're getting ready to remove it. The reason we heated it up is because there's some Loctite on there. And what we don't want to happen is when you go to apply some torque on this part, we don't want the free piston shaft to unthread from the cap. That's just going to give you some extra work that you don't want to deal with. Now, you can use a wrench if you want. I prefer a deep socket instead to go down on it. This is a number 13, and we can go ahead and remove this now. So as you can see, it took very minimal effort on my part in order to remove this. And by effort, I mean you still apply some torque, but the Loctite is pretty soft at this point. Now remember, this part is hot, so don't be grabbing it right away. See, I'm learning. Rag. I'm going to set that back there. Next, we're going to continue disassembling this because with our kit came a different pressure spring. We're going to go to a softer one for the setup we're doing on this. And what we also want to do is just wipe out any other contaminants or debris that may have gotten around this component when we were doing the grinding earlier. And while it's still warm, if there's any Loctite on the inside of here, please use like a pick or something small. Let's angle this down again, so that way if there's anything in there, it'll come out and fall out of the component instead of going farther in side of the free piston shaft. So on this one, I'm not seeing any additional Loctite buildup inside of there. So we'll have a very clean install of our sub valve next. Our free piston shaft is looking very beautiful. We're going to go ahead and wipe this down of any extra oil residue. I'm not seeing any, looks like contaminants or debris from our grinding earlier. There is a metal spring plate that is stuck on here, likely just the film strength. It has that on there still, so we'll leave that in there. Now, these springs are usually marked. 20 Newton is the OEM spring rate for this. We're going down to an 18 for this spec. These will usually be labeled as well. Now, these are not directional. You can install it either way. And on the inside of your free piston cup will be another, let's call it spring keeper or spring guide. Let's wipe this down as well. Now, it does have a lip section that is going to fit into the inside of the spring, again, to align everything. Now, on our free piston, we have two key components. We have the outside quad ring seal and also a O-ring on the inside as well. That both are very critical in sealing this application. So let's go ahead and wipe these down also and just triple check there is no dirt or debris of any kind. Then I'm going to carefully look on the inside and make sure that there isn't any Loctite around the inside of this O-ring. And I'm not seeing anything. But even though I don't see anything, I'm still going to take this towel and give it a good wipe down on the inside as well. So this is looking good as new. Is ready to install this back on. Now this is directional. You can see in relation to where the free piston seal is on the outside, the deeper side is going to go down against the spring. And when we go to install this, kind of give it a wiggling motion to get it safely over this free piston shaft and not to damage the O-ring. This is going to sit pretty close and even to the free piston shaft once you have it properly installed. I'm going to set this aside over here because our next step will be installing our JBI sub valve that is already complete with custom JBI spec valving for you. All right, you guys, a new day, new shirt, same great attitude, and we're going to finish up this JBI spec DIY kit so you can get back on the trail riding. So picking up on where we left off, the next step is we're going to install our JBI sub valve assembly to our compression assembly that we just reassembled with the new pressure spring that we provided to you if your kit calls for it. And after we cleaned off everything as well. Your JBI sub valve will come in a nice squeeze, pop, top. So squeeze the sides. I like hearing that sound. Some of you will be familiar with these containers already. Inside you might find a nice little piece of a lifesaver candy. Reason being is people often tell us that your suspension is so good, it is a lifesaver. And it looks like we got another piece in there as well. I've eaten plenty of these today, so I'm going to pass on eating one of these. And if you do have different colors inside of your containers, that does not mean they're different specs. You just got two different flavors to eat from. So here's the assembly that comes. All the shims are already preset. We have a titanium nut that goes with it as well. What I'm going to do is apply some Loctite to the bottom threads right here. Again, at Ride JBI, we like to use the orange locking compound, but you can also use blue or red. I don't really recommend red though, because it can be a really pain to take back apart if you do need to take it apart again. When it comes to Loctite, less is more. So by that, I mean, don't get carried away. If you put on too much, you're going to have a lot of excess Loctite seeping through and possibly locking up other parts of the assembly. I'm going to give this a nice little shake, kind of mix it up, and then start this off with a little dab on the threads. And then now we're going to use the tip of the applicator, just kind of move it around and spread that Loctite out. Cool. So I'm going to start threading this by hand first, and then later on I'm going to put it inside of the assembly. Cool. So as you notice, I left the shims on here. You can take them off if you want. Now we have two flat spots for a wrench to locate to assemble this the rest of the way. It's going to be a 17 millimeter. Now I have a very thin wrench that I bought from Amazon. Happy to do the color gold as well, because I tend to like that. And that's going to work really well for fitting inside of here to allow us to assemble it without interfering and rubbing against our plastic free piston. A normal size 17mm wrench, such as something like this, will still work. I just recommend pulling down on the free piston when you use this to apply it. So now I've gotten this pretty finger tight. I'm going to put this in our fixture right here so I can torque it down the rest of the way. And let's make sure this is tight. There we go. Oh, wrong direction. Cool. Now these threads are an M8 by 125. The gold post is made out of titanium and the free piston is aluminum. So the torque spec, I would say, is probably around 10 foot-pounds or so. Nothing too crazy. But I know a lot of you aren't going to have a tool adapter to apply a torque wrench onto this. So just, if you're doing suspension, you probably have a reasonable idea for how tight something should be. And also how hard it was to remove the original sub-valve post. Cool. So this is assembled and looking awesome. Next up, I'll let you guys come over here. We're going to install our piston assembly, and I have it laid out in the exact order that we want to do it in. So here's our original compression piston, which we're going to reuse. So you can see the sides that are bigger, or the bigger ports. That is going to go directly against the shims themselves. The ports on the very outside, these kind of elongated slots, those are going to get covered up by this special looking rebound check plate shim. So we want to make sure that they go in this exact order. It's going to go our compression piston, our check plate shim, our pivot shim, and then our washer underneath, and then our nut. So we can take this off by hand. I've already gone ahead and I've cleaned these off with compressed air to make sure it's very clean. So that's the direction that's going to go. If you ever push down on this, and you hear any kind of crunching noise, what that means is there's some dirt or some type of just debris inside of your shims or on your piston sill. It's not clean. Next, let's install this. This is not directional. It can go either way, and there's not a certain orientation that this needs to be in. So just go ahead and drop it on. Now this pivot shim is very important. It is a small one, but we need to have it on there. It gaps out our check plate shim from our washer, so it gives this check plate shim a little bit of area to flex open during the rebound stroke. What we're going to do next is apply a little bit of Loctite on the tip of the threads. Now for this, we want to apply the Loctite to the male threads and not to the nut. So that way when we thread it on, it pushes the Loctite into the threads, and any extra is going to go behind the nut a little bit. But ideally, we use just the right amount, so there's no extra. Again, we'll use the applicator tip to kind of smear it around. Because what we don't want is any Loctite going on the inside of this hole and potentially seizing up our compression adjuster needle. Now, this nut is directional. You can see the little grooves we have in it. Those are going to go up facing towards you. Awesome. And that nut pretty much comes just about flush with that. Depending on the shim stack we give you, how much of the JBI sub-valve protrudes from the nut is going to vary. Now the torque spec on this is going to be 45 inch-pounds. That also converts to 5 Newton meters. Now when using a torque wrench, be sure to grab it at the handle. And there's our click. So that tells us this is perfectly torqued. Awesome. So we are complete with our JBI Spec compression assembly. Now it is time to turn our attention to the mid-valve assembly. So we got our mid-valve fixtured up inside of our shaft block clamps. Before we clamp the rod, I made sure to double check that the rod was clean of any dirt or debris, and so were the shaft block clamps. So that way we don't engrave or smash any foreign debris into the rod, thus damaging it. So the first piece we're going to put in is our return spring. This is not directional. It can go in either direction. Now that we have that in, it's time to open up our properly labeled baggie, which says JBI Spec mid-valve compression shims. Now we're going to have 2 shim stacks inside of there. Those are also going to be identical specs, so you can grab either one of those. They're held together with some nice gold twist tie wire. And now I'm going to grab a small T-handle like Allen key. We're going to use a number 2.5, and I'm going to slide these onto here before removing our twist tie. Now, an easy way to know which direction is up is the bottom shims are going to be 18 millimeter in diameter, and the top shims are going to be 20 millimeters in diameter. Reason being is we need to use a 20 millimeter shim in order to cover the ports completely on our rebound piston. So, with that said, our 18 millimeter shims are the first ones to go down, and these are going to contact our return spring. This lines up beautifully inside of the bleed port hole, and as you can see, I located the shims around the collar post that is built into the rebound post. Just to get more details, this post right here is 6 millimeters, and then this collar below it is 8 millimeters. So the shims that we gave you have an 8 millimeter ID, and they're going to sit on here. Be careful when you assemble this that you do not put the shim resting on the edge and then tighten it down. You're going to bend and permanently deform the shim, and also the install will not be correct. So this is a no. That is an astounding and beautiful yes. Now it is ready to install our rebound piston. This is directional. An easy way to tell which way to go is we have a relief cut inside of the bottom, and that is going to locate perfectly with our 8 millimeter collar that's built in. The other side of this is perfectly flat, and that's where rebound shims are going to go on. What I'm going to do is take my left hand and push down on these shims to further expose that collar to really ensure that this piston installs and does not catch any of the shims. Now when I take my hand off, this will lift up a little bit from the pressure of the spring underneath, but nothing to worry about. And that play right there is normal. It'll be gone once we put on our rebound shims and we torque down that nut. So now it's time to open our appropriately labeled JBI Spec Rebound Mid-Valve Shim Stack Baggie. Just like the compression mid-valve shims, both shim stacks are identical, so you can utilize either one. And we're going to use the same technique as before, meaning we're going to slide them on this 2.5 millimeter T-handle Allen key that I have. The reason I like to pre-build these stacks for you, because I've learned the more time and effort I take on your initial setup, by that I mean listening to you, the rider, and the more information I gather, the better understanding I have on how I need to customize our JBI settings for you. And then that allows me to give you a specific setting for you instead of going through somebody like Race Tech, which does great work, but you have to look through their valve charts and then guess which one thinks works best for you. We have to go one step further and give you that very white glove touch. So I got this located in the center. We're going to fit our shims onto here. Awesome. Now it is time to put our nut back on. Now this nut is directional. It is going to have threads that start at the top, and then we're going to have a relief cut at the bottom where there are no threads. So the part of the nut that is a cylinder, meaning a wrench does not fit on there, that is going to be going down, going directly against the valving shims. If you put this on upside down, you're going to run out of threads, and you're not going to bolt down this assembly, and it's going to be loose. So please take very critical care of that. Just as we did on our compression assembly, we're going to apply it Loctite to the male threads and not onto the nut. Again, the reason for that is we don't want any Loctite going down inside of the bleed port and possibly seizing our rebound needle. Now, instead of me applying Loctite like this, I'm going to take this rod out, hold it vertical, and apply some Loctite that way to ensure we don't make a mess and get Loctite anywhere. With suspension, it's nicest take your time and do it right the first time, so you don't have to take it apart and do it again a second time. So what I'm doing right now is I use my 2 fingers to grab the top of this and push down so I have everything seated. We can double check our shims are in the right place because our compression shims should be able to check open just a small amount. How far these lift open will be determined by the setting that we give to you. To oversimplify, the softer the setting, the more these shims are going to lift open. The firmer the setting, the lesser these shims are going to lift or float open. All right, let's give this a good little shake. And now time to apply some Loctite. Again, less is more, especially on these fine threads. This is a M6 thread by 0.75. It is a very fine thread. And you're going to reuse the nut that you originally took off. Come on. There we go. As you can see, we have a noticeable amount on there, but nothing crazy. I'm going to use the applicator tip to move it around into the threads. And we can start this on by hand. And this is going to be the same torque spec as before. Earlier we had a titanium post and titanium nut of a similar grade. By that I mean tensile strength and thread strength as this steel post and steel nut is. So this will be 45 inch-pounds. Again, that converts to 5 Newton meters. Earlier in the video, I showed you guys if you don't have shaft block clamps, again, you can use an open-end wrench. I think it is a number 17 right here to hold this in place instead. Awesome. As you can see, again, I gripped the torque wrench at the handle. That's the appropriate spot. Do not grab it farther up here. And I made sure that it clicked a few times just to verify we're right at that spec. Now we have a very, very small amount of residual Loctite at the base of this nut. I'm just going to use a small red rag to wipe that clean and away. So to ensure we did our work correctly, there's a few things we can check. Number one is going to be that our rebound shim stack, as the top shim stack here, it should be clamped, meaning it should be fixed. It should not spin, it should not lift. So I'm going to push here and it does not lift. Now it'll bend out of the way if I push hard, as it should, but it's not free floating. Our mid-valve piston, this is clamped and fixed as well. This should not spin, it should not move up and down. Only our compression shims here at the bottom should be able to lift away a small amount, and we can spin them also if we want to. So that tells us that this is been assembled correctly and is going to operate correctly as well. If any of these parameters are off, it'll have a very big influence in a negative way on how the fork performs. So now that we've done this, it's time to reinstall this back inside our cartridge, and we are on our white flag finishing lap and almost done with this JBI Spec DIY kit install. All right, on a serious note, you guys, great job so far. Great job doing this. Doing your own suspension work and valving is no walk in the park. It's definitely a very technical task that has a lot of very small and detailed steps. So if you're this far along and you've made no mistakes, you've done really good. If this is your first time doing it, you made a few mistakes, dude, no worries. You're learning, you will learn as you go. So now we're getting ready to install what we call the cartridge rod assembly back into the cartridge assembly itself. Now for our first step, can you guess what we're going to do? We're going to wipe everything down one last time before we reassemble it. So I can't stress how important it is to have everything absolutely clean. I love microfiber cloths because they do a great job of cleaning while not leaving any lint residue behind. Don't get any ideas. Now earlier we did clean out the inside of this. I'm going to do it one more time. Hold this right side up as you finger blast it on the inside. That way any particulates fall out the bottom. Now we're doing a thumb this time. So this is going to be pretty straightforward. Just install this into the bottom of the cartridge. And then you can bottom this out into the bottoming cone to kind of catch the threads of that cartridge seal head. Whoop, and there it is. Now all I wanted to do is catch the first couple threads, so that way we can apply some Loctite to them before we assemble this. What I'm going to do is first I'm going to fixture this back up into our clamp and then apply that Loctite and then tighten it the rest of the way down. As we talked about earlier, oil is not our friend when it comes to gripping around objects and making sure that it is fixtured and clamped well and doesn't spin. When it comes to clamping this, our mid-valve assembly is located right about here with it all the way down. We're gonna have to lift this back up to at least here in order to tighten this down. That's gonna put that mid-valve piston roughly right where these racking marks are. Racking marks are how a part gets held during the anodizer coating process. So if you see marks like this on your forks, that's nothing to worry about. That is common during any coating process. So what I'm getting at is when we clamp this tube, we want to clamp above that in this area, and we don't want to clamp the mid-valve that's underneath it. You will damage it and smash it. If you don't have these clamps, you're going to be clamping these two flat profiles in the parallel jaw vise as we detailed earlier in the video. I'll demonstrate. If I pull up too far, that mid piston stops because it's hitting this. That's what we don't want to do, meaning we don't want to clamp the mid piston underneath these clamps. All right, now I beat that dead horse too many times. You guys get it. Just give our Loctite a shake, mix it up, and apply some Loctite back to these threads. Cool, so we got a nice full rotation of Loctite applied to it. I'm going to use my trusty Nypax to thread this down the rest of the way. Ooh, perfect. Now take your time to get to the bottom. You want to make sure this O-ring gets seated inside of here and you're not going to pinch it on the edge. If you see it wanting to pinch, just pause and use a small flathead or something like this just to kind of put it inside of its place. But this one wants to go right back into its home, which would make Happy Gilmore very happy. All right, so we're going to double check our vise again. That's tight. We're going to tighten this down one last time. And go. Beautiful. So we're going to let that rest for about 2 hours here. Actually, we're going to let this sit overnight and let the Loctite go. But if I were you, in a rush, at least let this sit for about 2 to 3 hours. Let that Loctite cure on the valving components that you did. Then we'll flip this cartridge right side up, fill it up with oil, show you the bleeding process, and final assembly on this cartridge back into the fork. Now it's time to fill the damping cartridge with oil. If you look at your JBI suspension settings guide, we will have a settings listed called inner chamber oil volume. That's 175 cc's. So in my graduated beaker to the left of me, I have 175 cc's of oil, and we're going to pour that into our damping cartridge. Now for these forks, we're going to use a 5-weight fork oil. Here at the shop, we tend to favor the KYB brand of oil. The fork oil is labeled as K2C. So sorry, that's a lie. That's a shock oil. It is O1M. However, I can't stress this enough. I've had very good results and success using pretty much all other major brand oils. So Motul, Maxa, Motorex, Golden Spectro, WP, Showa, whoever I'm leaving out, Blood. I've had equal success, meaning I never use a different brand oil yet, and I've had to change settings because of it. What I have noticed though is some oils tend to have longer service lives than others. The KYBs tend to have a very long service life, so I tend to favor that. Plus, it's a fair price and it's readily available. You can get it from Amazon, and it's also readily available around the world. So if you're one of our international customers buying this kit, you can replicate our exact setup. So I poured that oil inside of here. Now it's time for me to bleed the air outside of the cartridge. We do that by crouching down, and we're going to slowly stroke up and down on this cartridge. Now, when you first do this, you're going to hear quite a bit of oil bubbles happening, and that is natural and common. Now, when I do this, I like to kind of spin the cartridge a little bit just to help get out any air bubbles that might be inside of that mid-valve piston. You can actually let go with your hand and let the rod fall back down under its own weight. And I'm going to spin it this way a little bit too. Now, it's not required to go all the way up on this to get out all the air. Gravity is going to do a great job of separating the oil and the air inside of our damping cartridge, aka the curvature of space-time. And then another thing I like to do is I'll kind of just bang on my vise a little bit and make it vibrate. You'll see a couple more air bubbles come up. Now here at the shop, you can see to the right of me, I have more fixtures. I'm actually bleeding up some XACT Pro 6500 cartridges as well. We do this so one of them will take up our vise so we can keep working, and two, we can really take our time. The more time you take getting out all the air, the better your damper is going to work. This is similar to a brake system. By that I mean, if you've ever tried bleeding your brakes, you will know that if you get any sort of air inside there, it heavily reduces how well your brakes perform. That same concept can be applied to your damping cartridge. If there's any air inside of there, it's heavily going to reduce how well it creates compression damping and rebound damping. Over time, again, gravity is going to separate. It's going to allow the density of the oil, which is denser, to go to the bottom, and the air is going to separate and naturally work its way up. So we're going to do a little transition here and wait about 5, maybe even 10 minutes. Let this thing pump and get all the air out. Then I'll show you the next step of installing our now JBI Spec compression assembly. Now that we have bled out all the air of our damping cartridge, it is now time to install our JBI Spec compression assembly. Now to do that, I'm going to push the damper rod all the way up until it stops against the cartridge seal head. Now if you're using a fixture like ours, meaning we're clamping on the tube, do not clamp the tube too tight or else it's going to make it really hard for the mid-valve to slide past here. Now, a lot of you at home will likely be clamping the two flat spots on the cartridge here instead, so you don't have to worry about that because the mid-valve will not be located in that area when you move this up all the way. A pro tip on this is I did put some grease on these threads, reason being when we install this and also when it comes back out, there's oftentimes a lot of pressure or tension on these threads, and the grease will help the threads not gall up. Also, I put a small film of grease around our free piston, specifically around the quad seal or X-ring seal that's inside of there. Reason for that is this free piston is going to move up and down quite a bit. It is lubricated by oil. I like to help it a little bit more and throw some grease in there as well. Don't worry, it's a very small amount of grease. It's not to contaminate the oil in any sort of way that negatively impacts the performance of this fork. So with this, we're going to slowly lift up on our cartridge rod. And then I'm going to keep my hand here because if I let go, the rod's actually going to want to move. And then when you do this, you may get a bubble or two. And then I like to kind of spin it as well. So I'll just kind of wait. This one's beautiful. It's crystal clear. I can actually see the mid piston itself now. So that tells me we did a really good job bleeding this and it's ready to install this. So now this is easy. We're just going to essentially set this in here. And I kind of wiggle it in a circular motion to help it. And then once I contact the oil, I'm going to let go with my finger at the bottom, and that's going to start pushing out the damping rod, and it's also going to suck in our compression assembly. Now, with the amount of oil that we specified, which is from the WP manual, this cartridge is slightly overfilled with oil. So right now, it's going to take a little bit of effort to continue pushing down to begin these threads. That's a good thing, because at the end, we're going to do what's called our final bleed, and that's going to get out any excess oil, and most importantly, any air that might still be caught up in there. Now, before I do that, I'm going to tighten this down a little bit. Reason being is the mid piston is now located down here. It's not in the way of the clamp, and I don't want this moving as I go to tighten this down. So let's use our compression assembly tool, line it up in the proper spot, make sure this is in the appropriate position for tightening down, and let's tighten it down. That looked badass, didn't it, guys? All right, let's do that again. Sweet. So I like to make these pretty tight. I don't want these coming loose. To each their own, but you definitely could tell how hard it was to take this apart. So as you work on this fork, just take in mind how hard it is to remove stuff and apply that same level of tightness / torque during the reassembly process. Now it's time to do our final bleed on this cartridge, and that's going to let oil come out this little bleed port right here once we're done. Now, I don't like to get sprayed with oil or squirted on, so we're going to wrap that up a little bit and cover it. I like to take one of our shop towels and kind of fold it 3 times and wrap it right around here. So this is our hole. Cool, we'll unfixture this out of our cartridge, set our 2 clamp tools down. So I'm gonna do this on the side for you guys' demonstration, easier to see. Normally I do it in here, but when I push this all the way down, we're gonna get some excess oil coming out of this hole right here. And I'm gonna do it slow because you're gonna hear a certain spot where the oil starts to purge and come out, and I'm actually gonna hold it right there. It's kind of very faint of a sound. Go a little bit more and bottom out. So I'm gonna hold this in the bottom out position for about 10 seconds. And what's gonna happen right now, let's see if I can pull this off, is that free piston's gonna start to equalize, meaning any extra oil that's in there has bled out, and that free piston's gonna start going back down. Now, if you did it correct, this rod's gonna extend all the way out on its own. We can double check this. Whew, that's looking very good. Now we're gonna have a little bit of volume of oil hidden inside of here. So let's just pour that out, so that way we don't have it drip on us. Cool, awesome job so far, guys. Pretty much the hard part is done. Now we just need to reinstall this damping cartridge back into our forks. When it comes to that, we have what we call our WP spring tube. That is this unit right here. It's comprised of 3 different pieces, and I want to make sure you all have them all in order. It's going to be the tube itself, there's going to be this metal ring, and then the plastic that's called the spring seat, which the spring pushes against. Make sure you do not misplace this item, or else you're going to bust this tube through the plastic piece. You don't want that. So let's put that back in there. Now on this tube, it is not directional, depending on which way you got it. They have the holes equally offset in different positions. So again, it does not matter which way you go. I'm going to give it a little wipe down with one of our microfiber towels to get off any contaminants. So let's install this onto here. And as you see, this fits beautifully over this area right here. Awesome. And then next up is going to be our spring. Now it's time to install the spring to our damping cartridge. Now I'm going to do this upside down. Let's make note we have our finger clicker on top. It's made out of plastic. Here I have a towel laid out on the surface. I'm actually going to lay down an additional one as well. So that way I have something soft to push on. If you do it directly against concrete or something hard, you might split or break that plastic piece. Now it's time to install the spring. Again, fork springs tend not to be directional. They tend to be a linear rate and have the same ID and OD of diameter spring on both ends. So we're going to install that on here. Now next up, you're going to have a preload spacer that was previously on your forks, along with, we'll call it the spring keeper or spring seat. So let's put that spacer back on first. I'm going to pull down with my left hand, and then we're going to take this piece and install it like that. And then we'll get some nice B-roll footage for you guys to check it out, how it should be properly aligned and set up. All right, you guys, again, I think I said earlier, we're on that final lap. I think we're 2 corners away from the finish line. So let's refixture up our fork. We got our spring located on here perfectly. Now, if you did it right, there should be just a small amount of preload on these. The amount of preload you have is going to vary per your application. For some of the settings, we might provide you with an extra preload spacer to give you a little bit more preload on the spring. That's going to depend on how firm of a setting that you choose from us. Cool. Now I'm going to side this tube up and just thread it, just a couple rotations. That just kind of helps locate it. Now what we want to make sure is here at the bottom that this located properly inside of the fork lug, which it did. Cool. So I'm going to just wipe out any dirt or any excess oil in there. Now I am going to apply a little bit of grease on the threads and on the O-ring as well. And then you can start this by hand. As I do it, I'm going to pull down with my left hand a little bit just to ensure I don't push the assembly up as I kind of slightly push on our rebound nut to thread it. And this is going to be a 22 millimeter thin wall socket in order to install it the rest of the way. All right, guys, the bottom torque on this is 25 Newton meters. So we're going to throw our torque wrench on that. Just double check. Ooh, right there. So now that we did that, why I have the fork fixture like this, I like to set the clickers. You can use your fingers or you can use a number 20 Torx. And I have a number 20 Torx T-handle right here. Kind of is a little easier on your fingers. Now I'm going to reference my settings guide again. This tells us our base settings is going to be 15 clicks out for compression and 15 clicks out for rebound. So let's set our rebound clicker right now. Beautiful. And now let's set our top compression clicker as well. Ooh, so 15 and 15. Whew. You guys ready to hit that finish line jump and finish this? Let's do it. Let's fixture this up. Check out our settings guide one last time. How much oil do we need in the outer chamber? Looks like we are calling for 360 cc's of oil. Let's grab our graduated cylinder again. I believe this one went to public school. So I'm going to do 350 and then grab our other smaller graduated cylinder we have that has a finer reading on it. So we can top off just the last 10 cc's of oil that we want. Now, if you've been following along, you probably noticed that I like using grease. So I'm going to throw a little bit of grease on these threads as well. Now, we check it out. I made a little cutout in the back. This helps when we go to pour oil in. We can get out any residual that's in there. Not my idea. I saw somebody else, I believe on Instagram or YouTube, that did it. And I thought, like, dude, good idea, man. Cool. We're just going to be patient. Let the last little bit drip out. We want to get all of it. And then I'm going to go grab our smaller graduated cylinder to get that last 10 cc's of oil. Well, you guys have been following this whole video, and everything's gone absolutely perfect on our install. Even if you had a few hiccups, but you're at this point. Great job getting everything installed. Again, suspension is a pretty meticulous thing. You got that nice, good and tight. I like to call that the old German spec. That's not going anywhere. Let's just double check our work real quick. We got oil in the outer chamber, 360 cc's. We got our clicker set per our guide, which is 15 and 15. We did 175 cc's of oil in our inner cartridge. We bled it beautifully of any air inside of it. And we've got our JBI Spec settings on the inside as well. So all that's left is for you to install your JBI Spec stickers that we provided you. Throw these back on your bike, go ride, and try not to smell too much.